Wait, what planet are we attacking?
It's Earth, sir. Run!
Fleet Commander Zorath Valinix stood at the center of his command bridge and looked out at the stars. His four eyes moved slowly across the viewing screen. Behind him, his officers waited in silence. They knew better than to speak before their commander was ready. The Bridge of the Eternal Dominion was a massive room. It was built to show power. The walls were made of dark metal that reflected the blue lights from dozens of control stations. Valkyrie officers sat at these stations, their insect-like bodies bent over screens and buttons. They were the best crew in the entire 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Zorath had chosen each one himself. Zorath was tall for a Valkyrie. He stood on 4 legs, and his upper body rose high above his officers. His carapace was a deep purple color that showed his royal bloodline. His mandibles clicked softly as he thought about the mission ahead. "Officers," he finally said, his voice deep and commanding. "Today we begin another glorious conquest for the Empire." The bridge erupted in excited chittering. The Valkyrie showed happiness by rubbing their legs together, creating a sound like 1,000 insects singing. Zorath allowed himself a small feeling of pride. His fleet had conquered 12 worlds in the last cycle alone. The Emperor himself had praised Zorath's name. "Silence," Zorath commanded, and the noise stopped immediately. "Let me tell you about our target." He pressed a button on his command chair, and a hologram appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed a small blue and green planet floating in space. It looked peaceful. It looked weak. "This world sits in an unremarkable solar system at the edge of the Orion Arm," Zorath explained. "Our scouts discovered it several cycles ago. The planet is rich in water, metals, and biological resources. It is perfect for harvesting." One of his officers raised a clawed hand. It was Vexus, his weapons commander. "What resistance can we expect, Fleet Commander?" Zorath made a sound that was the Valkyrie version of laughter. "Almost none, Vexus. The creatures who live on this world are primitive. They call themselves humans. They have only recently learned to leave their own atmosphere. Their fastest ships take months to reach their nearest neighbor planet." More chittering filled the room. This was wonderful news. A primitive species meant easy conquest. Easy conquest meant glory and rewards from the Emperor. "Their weapons are equally primitive," Zorath continued. "They use chemical explosions to push metal projectiles. They have basic energy weapons, but nothing that can scratch our shields. Our intelligence says they have never encountered alien life. They do not even agree among themselves that aliens exist." This brought even more excited sounds from the crew. An enemy that was not prepared, that did not even believe in the possibility of invasion, was the best kind of enemy. Zorath pulled up more images on the hologram. They showed human cities, human vehicles, human soldiers. Everything looked small and fragile compared to Valkyrie technology. "We have 30 warships in this fleet," Zorath said proudly. "Each one is capable of destroying a continent. I estimate this conquest will take 3 planetary rotations at most. We will demand their surrender first, as is our custom. When they refuse, as primitives always do, we will demonstrate our power. After that, they will submit." He turned to his sub-commander, a smaller Valkyrie named Tyrix. Tyrix was the intelligence officer of the fleet. His job was to learn everything about their enemies. "Tyrix, you will prepare a full briefing on these humans. Learn their languages, their governments, their military capabilities. I want to know everything before we arrive." Tyrix bowed his head. "Yes, Fleet Commander. I will begin immediately." "Good. All officers return to your stations. We enter warp in 1 hour." Dismissed. The officers scattered to their positions and Zorath sat back in his command chair. He allowed himself to feel satisfied. 47 species had fallen to the Valkyrie Empire. The humans would be number 48. It was simply how the universe worked. The strong conquered the weak. The advanced ruled the primitive. This was the natural order. Zorath had been a fleet commander for 30 cycles. He had seen species beg for mercy. He had seen them try to fight back with sticks and stones. He had seen them run and hide. In the end, they all submitted. The humans would be no different. He looked at the blue planet on the screen one more time. It really was a pretty world. It was a shame that its people would soon be slaves. But that was the price of being weak in a universe full of predators. "Helm," Zorath called out. "Plot a course for the target system." "Best speed." "Yes, Fleet Commander." "Course plotted." "Warp engines ready." Zorath leaned forward. "Engage." The stars on the viewing screen stretched into long lines of light as the Eternal Dominion jumped to faster-than-light speed. The other 29 ships of the fleet followed in perfect formation. They moved as one, a deadly arrow flying through space toward an unsuspecting world dot in his private quarters later that night. Zorath reviewed the preliminary data on Earth. The humans were interesting, he had to admit. They had built impressive structures despite their primitive technology. Their art and music showed creativity. Their science was advancing quickly, even if it was still far behind the Velkari. Such potential, Zorath muttered to himself. Wasted on a species that never had a chance. He closed the data files and prepared for sleep. The journey to Earth would take several cycles. When he arrived, he would add another world to his list of conquests. The Emperor would reward him greatly. Perhaps he would even be promoted to Grand Admiral. Zorath fell asleep dreaming of glory and power. He had no idea that this mission would be different from all the others. He had no idea that the small blue planet was not what it seemed. He had no idea that somewhere on that world, creatures that looked soft and weak carried the hearts of monsters. The humans were waiting, not because they knew the Velkari were coming, but because humans were always waiting for a fight. It was simply their nature. And the universe was about to learn a terrible lesson about what happened when you threatened the people of Earth. But for now, Fleet Commander Zorath slept peacefully, dreaming of easy victory. In 3 cycles, those dreams would become nightmares. The Eternal Dominion sailed on through the dark void of space, carrying its crew toward a destiny none of them could have imagined. Sub-Commander Therix sat alone in the intelligence chamber of the Eternal Dominion. The room was dark except for the glow of multiple screens in front of him. His 4 eyes moved quickly across the data, and his clawed hands trembled as they worked the controls. He had been studying the humans for 2 full cycles now. At first, he thought this would be easy work. Learn their language, map their governments, count their weapons. Simple tasks for a simple species, but the more Thyrex learned, the more afraid he became. The humans had been transmitting radio signals into space for over 100 of their years. The Velkari had intercepted thousands of these signals. They contained news broadcasts, entertainment programs, historical records, and scientific data. Thyrex had access to almost everything the humans had ever created, and what he found made his blood turn cold. This cannot be right, Thyrex whispered to himself. He checked the data again. Then he checked it a 3rd time. The results were the same. The humans were not a peaceful species. They were not simple farmers or gentle explorers. They were something the Velkari had never encountered before. They were predators who had run out of prey and turned on each other. Thyrex pulled up their history files. The humans had been at war with themselves for as long as they had existed. Not small wars. Not simple conflicts over territory. Massive, terrible wars that killed millions of their own kind. He found records of something called World War I. In just 4 years, 17 million humans had died. They killed each other with guns, with poison gas, with bombs dropped from the sky. The battlefield photographs showed a level of destruction that made Thyrex feel sick. But that was not the worst part. Just 20 years later, the humans started World War II. This conflict killed 70 million of them. 70 million. The number was so large that Thyrex had to check if his translator was working correctly. During this war, the humans created something new. They learned how to split the atom and turn it into a weapon. They called it a nuclear bomb. The first time they used it, they destroyed an entire city in a single flash of light. Then they did it again to another city, just to prove they could. Thyrex watched footage of these explosions. He saw the mushroom clouds rising into the sky. He read reports about the heat, the radiation, the complete destruction of everything within miles of the blast. And then he learned the most terrifying fact of all. After the war ended, the humans did not destroy these weapons. They made more of them. Many more. At one point, they had enough nuclear bombs to destroy their own planet several times over. And they pointed these weapons at each other. They called this strategy mutual assured destruction. Both sides knew that if one attacked, the other would strike back. Everyone would die. And they considered this a reasonable way to keep peace. They are insane, Thyrex said out loud. They are completely insane. But he kept reading. He found records of their other conflicts: Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan, dozens of smaller wars that killed hundreds of thousands more. The humans have been fighting somewhere on their planet every single year for centuries. He studied their entertainment next. Their movies were filled with violence. Their games simulated warfare. Their sports were often based on combat. Their heroes were warriors and soldiers and fighters. Even their children played games about killing. Their bodies were strange too. Humans were not fast or strong compared to many species. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. But they could run for hours without stopping. They could survive injuries that would kill most creatures. They healed quickly. They adapted to almost any environment, and they were social predators. They hunted in groups. They communicated constantly. They formed bonds of loyalty so strong that they would die for each other without hesitation. Thyrex found a human concept that had no translation in the Valkyrie language. The humans called it spite. It meant doing something harmful to yourself just to make sure your enemy suffered more. A human would cut off their own hand if it meant they could slap their enemy one more time. The Valkyrie did not have a word for this because no Valkyrie could imagine thinking this way. Fleet Commander needs to see this, Thyrex muttered. He gathered his files and rushed out of the intelligence chamber. He found Zorath in the command center, overseeing preparations for their arrival at Earth. The fleet commander looked up with irritation when Thyrex burst through the door. Sub-Commander. This had better be important. Commander, we must abort the mission immediately. The target species is not what we thought. Zorath's mandibles clicked with annoyance. Explain yourself. Thyrex held up his datapad with shaking hands. The humans, sir. They are not primitives. They are apex predators. They have been at constant war with themselves for their entire history. They have weapons capable of destroying their own planet. Many species have internal conflicts, Zorath said dismissively. It is a sign of weakness, not strength. No, sir, you do not understand. Thyrex pulled up the nuclear explosion footage. Look at this. This is what they did to their own cities. They killed hundreds of thousands of their own people in seconds. And then they built enough of these weapons to do it thousands of times over. Zorath watched the footage with narrowing eyes. Impressive firepower, but our shields can handle nuclear weapons. Sir, that is not the point. Thyrex was almost begging now. The point is that they were willing to use these weapons on themselves. They would rather destroy everything than lose. They call it mutual assured destruction. They think it is normal. They think it is logical. He pulled up more data. Look at their casualty rates in wars. They lose millions of soldiers and keep fighting. They lose cities and keep fighting. Their entire philosophy of warfare is based on never giving up, no matter the cost. Zorath was silent for a long moment. Something in the data had caught his attention. They healed from all of this. He asked quietly, "Yes, sir." After World War II, their population was about 2 billion. Now it is over 8 billion. They recovered in less than 80 of their years. And during that time, they never stopped fighting other wars. Thyrix leaned closer. "Commander, we have conquered species that gave up after losing 10% of their population. The humans lost 3% in a single war and came back stronger. They are not like anything we have faced before." Zorath sat back in his command chair. For the first time, Thyrix saw doubt in his commander's eyes. "What do you recommend, Sub-Commander?" "We should leave this system immediately. We should report to the Emperor that Earth is too dangerous to attack. We should warn the entire Empire to stay away from these creatures." Zorath was quiet for a long time. The bridge crew watched nervously, sensing that something was wrong. Finally, the fleet commander shook his head. "No, we are the Valkyrie. We do not run from primitives, no matter how violent their history. Our shields are strong. Our weapons are superior. We will proceed with the invasion." Thyrix felt his heart sink. "Sir, please reconsider. My decision is final. Return to your duties, Sub-Commander. We arrive at Earth in one cycle." Thyrix bowed his head and walked slowly back to the intelligence chamber. As he sat down among his screens full of human horrors, he knew with terrible certainty that the Third Expeditionary Fleet was about to make the worst. Mistaken Valkyrie history thought the countdown to Earth continued. And in the darkness of space, the blue planet waited silently for visitors it did not yet know were coming. The Eternal Dominion dropped out of warp space with a flash of blue light. 29 other warships appeared behind it, their dark hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. The fleet moved into a perfect formation high above the blue planet called Earth. Fleet Commander Zorath stood at the center of his bridge, all four eyes fixed on the viewing screen. The planet was beautiful, he had to admit. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. White clouds swirled over green and brown continents. It looked peaceful and quiet. "All ships report ready," his communications officer announced. "The fleet is in attack position." Zorath nodded with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The humans had not detected them yet, or if they had done nothing about it. "Begin the standard intimidation broadcast," Zorath ordered. "All frequencies. Let them know their new masters have arrived." The communications officer worked his controls. Across every radio frequency, television channel, and digital network on Earth, a message began to play. It was in every human language, translated perfectly by Valkyrie computers. "People of Earth, this is Fleet Commander Zorath of the Valkyrie Empire. Your planet is now under our control. You will surrender immediately. Any resistance will be destroyed. You have one planetary rotation to comply." Zorath smiled to himself. This part was always enjoyable. The panic, the confusion, the desperate calls for peace. He had seen it 47 times before. But something strange happened. Instead of panic, the human communication networks exploded with something else entirely. The Valkyrie translators struggled to process it all. "Sir," the communications officer said with confusion in his voice. "The humans are responding. Put it on screen." The viewing screen filled with thousands of human transmissions happening at once. But they were not pleas for mercy. They were not offers of surrender. They were jokes. The humans were laughing at them. Images appeared showing crude drawings of Valkyrie, ships with human insults written on them. Something called memes spread across their networks, mocking the invasion. Within hours, the humans had created songs about the aliens. They had made merchandise. They were selling shirts that said, "I survived the Valkyrie invasion before the invasion had even started," and they were betting. Actual gambling on whether the humans would win or lose. The odds were in favor of Earth. "They think this is entertainment," Zorath said slowly. He could not believe what he was seeing. "Sir, look at this." His tactical officer pulled up satellite images of Earth's surface. The humans were mobilizing. Every nation on the planet was activating its military. Soldiers were moving. Vehicles were rolling out of bases. Aircraft were taking off. Ships were leaving Portstad, and they were doing it together. "This is impossible," the tactical officer muttered. "Our intelligence said these nations were enemies. They have been fighting each other for decades. But look at them now." Countries that had been pointing weapons at each other yesterday were now sharing information freely. Old enemies were working side by side. The entire planet was uniting against the alien threat. "They are putting aside their conflicts," Tyrek said quietly from his station. "All of them." At the same time, Zorath felt a small chill run through his body. The Valkyrie had never seen this before. When they invaded a planet, the local factions usually fought each other as much as they fought the invaders. Division made conquest easy, but the humans were different. Faced with an outside threat, they had become one people in a matter of hours. "Begin the demonstration," Zorath commanded, pushing his doubts aside. "Target the large desert region on the western continent. Show them what our weapons can do." "Yes, Fleet Commander." Charging main cannons. A beam of blue energy shot down from the Eternal Dominion and struck the Mojave Desert. 100 square miles of sand turned to glass in an instant. The explosion could be seen from space. "That should convince them," Zorath said. "Send another surrender demand." But instead of surrender, something appeared on the tracking screens that made no sense. "Sir, they are launching projectiles at us," the tactical officer reported. "Multiple launches from several countries. Nuclear weapons?" "Negative, sir. These appear to be rockets, old chemical rockets. They cannot possibly harm our ships." Zorath watched the tiny rockets rise slowly from Earth's surface. They were laughably primitive. They would take hours to reach orbit. The shields would swat them away like insects. Then more launches appeared. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. "Sir, they are launching everything they have." Zorath laughed. "Let them waste their resources. Our shields will hold against anything they can throw at us." But he stopped laughing when the first wave of rockets reached orbit. The rockets did not aim for the Valkyrie ships. They exploded in the upper atmosphere, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that washed over the fleet. Half the targeting systems on half the ships went dark in an instant. "What happened?" Zorath shouted. "They detonated nuclear weapons in their own atmosphere," the tactical officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "They created an EMP burst. They sacrificed their own satellites to blind our sensors. They attacked themselves to hurt us." Before anyone could answer, alarms started screaming across the bridge. "Boarding alert! Boarding alert on the Valkrantis." Zorath spun to his tactical display. The Valkrantis was one of his escort ships, positioned on the edge of the formation. Red lights were flashing all over its hull indicator. "Impossible. We are in orbit. How could they possibly board us?" The answer came through a shaky video transmission from the Valkrantis. Human soldiers in bulky white suits were cutting through the hull with plasma torches. They had reached orbit using chemical rockets. Suicide rockets with no plan for return. And they were laughing. Even through their helmets, The Valkyrie could hear them laughing as they broke into the ship. "They are insane," Zorath whispered. The video showed humans pouring through the breach, firing primitive weapons at everything that moved. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. They had no backup and no way home. And they did not care. One human soldier took 3 plasma shots to the chest. His armor melted. His body burned. And he still crawled forward, still firing, until a Valkyrie soldier finally ended him. More alerts sounded. 2 more ships reported boarding attempts. "Get us out of here," someone on the bridge whispered. Zorath said nothing. He just stared at the screen, watching humans die with smiles on their faces. And he realized with growing horror that Sub-Commander Thyrix had been right about everything. They had not invaded a primitive planet. They had kicked the Hornets, nest filled with creatures who had been waiting their entire existence for something to fight. And now the Hornets were very, very angry. The battle for Earth lasted 72 hours. It was the longest 72 hours in Valkyrie history. Fleet Commander Zorath had stopped giving orders hours ago. He simply stood at his command post, watching his fleet die piece by piece, unable to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The humans should not have been winning. They had no fleet, no shields, no energy weapons. Their technology was centuries behind the Valkyrie. And yet ship after ship was falling. "Sir, the Valmorath is gone," his tactical officer reported. His voice had lost all emotion. He was simply reciting facts now. "That makes 12 ships destroyed, 8 more disabled." Zorath did not respond. He was watching the latest boarding action on his screen. A group of humans had reached the cruiser Eternal Shadow, using nothing but chemical rockets and spacesuits. There were only 20 of them against a crew of 300 Valkyrie soldiers. The fight should have lasted minutes. It had lasted 6 hours so far, and the humans were still advancing. The Valkyrie had better weapons. They had better armor. They had the advantage of numbers and position. But the humans simply refused to die properly. One human soldier had taken a blade through his stomach. Any Valkyrie would have fallen immediately. The human pulled the blade out, threw it back at his attacker, and kept fighting for another 10 minutes, before blood loss finally brought him down. Another human had lost her arm to a plasma blast. She had wrapped the wound with cloth torn from her own suit, picked up her weapon with her remaining hand, and charged back into the fight. They fought like demons. They fought like monsters. They fought like nothing the Valkyrie had ever seen. "How are they doing this?" Zorath finally asked out loud. "They are weaker than us. They are slower than us. Their weapons are primitive. How are they winning?" Sub-Commander Thyrix appeared at his side. The intelligence officer looked exhausted, but there was no satisfaction in his eyes. He had been right, but he took no pleasure in it. "I have been studying them throughout the battle," Thyrix said quietly. "I think I understand now. Then explain it to me." Thyrix pulled up data on his pad. "The Valkyrie fight to win. When victory becomes impossible, we retreat. When retreat becomes impossible, we surrender. It is logical. It preserves lives." He pulled up footage of human soldiers making a suicide charge. The humans do not think this way. They do not fight to win. They fight to hurt. They fight to make the enemy pay. Even if they cannot win, they want to take as many of us with them as possible. That is madness. To us, yes. Yes. To them, it is honor. It is glory. It is something they call spite. Thyrix showed more data. Look at their communications. They know they are outmatched. They know many of them will die. And they do not care. They are actually happy about this. Zorath struggled to understand. Happy to die? Happy to fight? Happy to face a real challenge? "Commander, the humans have been waiting for this. Not an alien invasion specifically, but something to unite against. Something to test themselves against. We gave them a gift. On the screen, another human soldier fell. His squad mates did not mourn. They shouted something that the translator rendered as "remember him," and fought harder. Their psychology is built around conflict, Thyrix continued. They bond through shared struggle. They define themselves by their enemies. Without something to fight, they fight each other. But give them an outside threat, and they become something terrifying. Alarms sounded again. Another ship was being boarded. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are intercepting human military transmissions. They are coordinating their attacks using codes we cannot break. Our computers should crack any code they create." "These are not codes, sir. They are references. They speak of things called Alamo and Thermopylae. They quote from something called movies. Our translators cannot understand the context." Zorath felt a new wave of frustration. The humans were communicating in plain speech, and the Valkyrie still could not understand them. On the surface of Earth, things were even worse. The Valkyrie had landed 10,000 ground troops on 3 continents. They were supposed to secure key locations and begin the occupation. Instead, they were fighting for their lives. Human soldiers appeared from everywhere. They came from cities and farms and mountains and forests. They used weapons that should have been useless against Valkyrie armor. And yet they kept finding ways to hurt. A group of humans in a place called Finland had destroyed an entire Valkyrie armored column, using nothing but hunting rifles and homemade explosives. They had attacked in the middle of a snowstorm, hitting from all directions at once, then vanishing into the white before anyone could shoot back in a desert called Afghanistan. Local humans had shown the invaders a network of caves that had been used for fighting for thousands of years. Valkyrie soldiers entered those caves and never came out. In the jungles of Vietnam, the humans had set traps. Simple traps made of sharpened sticks and hidden holes. Traps that had been used generations ago and still worked perfectly. They have been practicing for this, Thyrix realized out loud. Their entire history has been practice for fighting invaders. Every war they fought taught them something new. And now they are using all of it against us. The humans adapted faster than any species Zorath had ever seen. In the first hours of battle, the Valkyrie had every advantage. By the second day, the humans had learned to counter almost everything. They had captured Valkyrie weapons and reverse-engineered them in hours. Their scientists worked without sleep, fueled by something they called coffee and pure anger. Their hackers broke into Valkyrie computer systems using methods that should have been impossible. One transmission intercept showed human teenagers treating the invasion as a game. They had created competitions to see who could hack the most alien systems. The winner had already broken into 3 ships. "Sir, we need to retreat," the tactical officer finally said. "We cannot sustain these losses." Zorath wanted to argue. He wanted to find a way to win. But looking at his fleet, he knew the truth. They had lost half their ships. The humans had lost millions of soldiers, and they were still coming. They would never stop coming. "All ships," Zorath said, his voice heavy with defeat, "fall back to the edge of the system. Prepare for warp jump." The order went out. The surviving ships of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet began to withdraw, leaving behind the burning wreckage of their comrades. On Earth, the humans watched them go. They did not celebrate. They simply began preparing for the aliens to return, because humans were always preparing for war. It was what they did best. The Eternal Dominion limped through space, its engines running at half power. Behind it, only 17 ships remained of the 30 that had arrived at Earth. The others were gone, destroyed or captured by creatures who should have been easy prey. Fleet Commander Zorath sat in his command chair, but he did not look like a commander anymore. His carapace had lost its shine. His 4 eyes stared at nothing. He had not slept in 3 cycles. The retreat had been a nightmare. Even as the Valkyrie fled, the humans had chased them. They had launched more rockets, more missiles, more suicide ships filled with soldiers who knew they would never come home. 3 more vessels had been lost during the escape, and the worst part was what the humans were doing now. "Sir," the communications officer reported nervously, "we are still intercepting transmissions from Earth." Zorath did not want to hear it, but he nodded anyway. "They are salvaging our destroyed ships. They have already recovered several intact systems, including 2 warp cores." The bridge went silent. Every officer understood what this meant. "How long until they have FTL capability?" Zorath asked, his voice hollow. Sub-Commander Thyrix checked his calculations. "Based on their rate of technological advancement, and considering that they now have working examples to study, I estimate 5 to 10 of their years. Perhaps less if they dedicate significant resources." "They will," Zorath said. "They will dedicate everything." He finally stood up from his chair and walked to the viewing screen. The stars looked cold and empty. Somewhere behind them, the blue planet grew smaller with every passing moment. "We have made a terrible mistake," Zorath said to no one in particular. The Valkyrie Empire had conquered 47 species. Some had been dangerous. Some had resisted bravely. But all of them had eventually accepted defeat. All of them had surrendered when the cost of fighting became too high. The humans had no concept of too high. "I reviewed their history more thoroughly during the retreat," Thyrix said, moving to stand beside his commander. "I found something that explains everything. Tell me, there was a human nation called the Soviet Union. During a war against invaders, they lost 27 million of their people. 27 million, sir. And they won that war. Their strategy was to trade lives for time, to absorb everything the enemy could throw at them, and keep fighting until the enemy ran out of resources." Zorath felt sick. They considered that acceptable? They considered it victory. The humans have a saying, "They will make the enemy pay for every inch of ground with blood." And they mean it literally. Thyrix paused. "Commander, we killed approximately 2 million humans during our invasion. Their total population is over 8 billion. We barely hurt them, and they killed 12,000 of us." "Yes, sir." "And they captured another 5,000. Thyrix lowered his voice. "Those prisoners will be studied. The humans will learn everything about our biology, our technology, our weaknesses." Zorath closed his eyes. The full horror of the situation was finally becoming clear. The humans had been contained on their single planet. They had spent their energy fighting each other, limited by their lack of space travel. They were dangerous, but they were trapped. Now they had warp technology. Now they knew other species existed. Now they had a reason to leave their world, and they were angry. "What do we tell the Emperor?" the tactical officer asked quietly. Zorath turned to face his surviving crew. They looked at him with fear and shame. They had followed him into the worst defeat in Valkyrie history, and now they wanted him to explain it. "We tell him the truth," Zorath said slowly. "All of it." He moved to the center of the bridge and stood tall, trying to regain some dignity. "We tell the Emperor that we attacked a species unlike any we have encountered. A species that treats war as natural as breathing. A species that would burn their own world rather than surrender it. A species that takes joy in combat and finds honor in death." His voice grew stronger as he spoke. "We tell him that the humans are not primitives to be conquered. They are predators who have been sharpening their claws on each other for thousands of years. They have weapons capable of destroying planets, and they have the will to use them." Thyrix nodded. "We must warn the Empire." "Yes, every world, every colony, every outpost must know." Zorath looked at the stars again. The humans are coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. They will build ships. They will explore. And when they find us, they will remember what we did to them. He turned back to his crew. We tell the Emperor to prepare every fleet, every soldier, every weapon we have. And we tell him that it may not be enough. Zorath paused. Because the humans do not fight to survive. They fight to win. And they have never faced an enemy they could not eventually defeat. The bridge was silent. No one knew what to say. Finally, Thyrix spoke. What do we recommend, Commander? What should the Empire do? Zora thought for a long moment. He remembered the human soldiers laughing as they died. He remembered the teenage hackers breaking through military-grade encryption for fun. He remembered the nuclear explosions that the humans had aimed at themselves, just to blind their enemies. He remembered that the humans called this a Tuesday. We recommend that the Volcari Empire never contact Earth again. We recommend establishing a forbidden zone around their solar system. We recommend destroying any probe or ship that comes from their direction. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And if the humans ever send a message asking for peace, we recommend giving them whatever they want. Because the alternative is facing a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to kill, and just discovered that the universe is full of new targets. Zorath returned to his command chair and sat down heavily. Plot a course for home, he ordered. Maximum speed. Yes, Commander. As the Eternal Dominion prepared to jump to warp, Zorath took one last look at the distant star that was Earth's sun. The humans would come eventually. It might take years or decades, but they would come. And when they did, they would not come as explorers or traders. They would come as what they had always been: conquerors, warriors, survivors. The universe had made a terrible mistake by letting the humans know they were not alone. They call their planet Earth. Thyrix said quietly. It means soil, ground, dirt. Zorath laughed bitterly. Of course it does. They named their world after something to fight over. The stars stretched into lines of light as the ship entered warp. Behind them, on a small blue planet, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and smiled. The aliens had come. And the aliens had run. Now, it was humanity's turn to reach for the stars. And the universe would never be the same.